A very good afternoon to you. This is D Flat Studios. I'm Jillian. I'm a piano teacher at the school here. And this afternoon, we have Miss Tang Tee Khoon, and she has made Singapore very proud as an internationally known violinist. Tee Khoon, welcome to you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here and to be, spending the next hour chatting with you.
We look forward to hearing what you have to say, because there are lots of things that us keyboardists, pianists, and vocalists have a lot to learn from string players like yourself. Oh, you're very kind. What have you been up to during the last 2 years of this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think the pandemic has changed everyone's lives in either in a small or big way, and especially for artists, those who rely on going on stage for their living. Basically, we've had to pivot 180 degrees. So as everyone was affected, I was affected as well. But during that time, I think nobody expected, including myself, that it would actually go on for this long. I was thinking about 6 to 9 months plans, and how can we ride out the pandemic? If it was 6 to 9 months. But I did not think that sort of some of the projects or the endeavors that we embarked on in those months would actually probably be our main undertakings for the next couple of years.
Right.
So actually, I am artistic director of Chamber Music and Arts Singapore. So I am a trained concert violinist, and I had a collective of artists that I worked with for many years. Since 2014, we were very steadily presenting 2 large projects a year at established venues in Singapore. And then when the pandemic hit, before the pandemic, it was always at the back of my mind that we would have to, kind of officialize our collective as an organization, but we just never had time because these projects were huge. We were welcoming like 1,400 audiences each project. And it was a very lean team. And we, it usually takes about 2 years of fundraising for each of our very, very ambitious projects. So when the pandemic hit, finally we had the time. So we actually got registered as a non-profit arts organization in 2020, and then received our charity status in 2021. So we were extremely busy trying to get structured as an organization, get our board in place, and have our company secretary direct kind of guide us as to how to get our infrastructure in place. So that's one of the main things I've been up to during the pandemic. But that's on the side of sort of the organization part. But then the artistic part, we did take a break from presenting large projects for 2 years. It was very unfortunate. We tried, but I think it was just not possible, the restrictions. And Chamber Music and Arts Singapore, it used to be known as TK Grand Series. We pride ourselves in keeping an international level of classical chamber music playing in Singapore, sort of on par with the other festivals around the world, like in, let's say, in the East Coast of America, or like in UK or Berlin and other capitals in Europe. And so we rely a lot on international artists coming in, and we would present, between like 1 to 6 international artists every big project. So again, with the border closing, we couldn't really keep that going. We do have a homegrown series that also had to take a break. So we actually pivoted and built a virtual creative sphere online, and it is, and we placed in it 4 programs that caters for very, very, very young children, all the way up to youths and young adults. And that's what we've been really, really focused on. And it produces educational content focused on classical music, or using classical music and the arts to enhance our personal inner growth. So that is what we have been extremely busy with, and building a community around that. And I have to say that we're probably more busy now than before the pandemic, which is mind-boggling. Yeah, I didn't think it would be possible.
You know, what you have created with your team during this time is very vital, and I would say very important, because the theme of our masterclass series, which is our third installment, is building a musical community. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. If
Right.
not for the pandemic, you would
Yeah.
have just been, yes, you've been building community through live performances, and those are wonderful and we need them. And oh my goodness, it's been
Yeah.
so hard not to go to live performances. But then as well, in what you've accomplished, congratulations on what you've built. And
Thank
please
you.
share with us a little bit more about that down the road in this chat as we are together this afternoon, please.
Yeah, definitely.
So one of the core values of the studio is cultivating musical community. And like you've shared, what are some ways that we can build a musical community aside from performances, as well as the online platforms that you've been building?
Aside from that, well, it's hard to say aside from that, because that's really where my mind has been in the past 2 years or for longer.
Yes, ma'am.
But maybe I can just share about what it takes to build a musical community,
Yes, please.
regardless of like, what medium you use. I think it's, of course, very important to not only appreciate the arts and the music that comes with the community, but also the values behind that. So I think that when you can kind of tie in music and arts with values and with education and with growth and with your personal life, I think that's when you can, that's sort of the groundwork of building a community, because you can encompass much more than simply, let's say, learning an instrument, right? So that's that can be quite one-sided depending on how you go about learning the instrument.
Very much so.
And I think as much as you can be wide and all-encompassing in relaying the enjoyment or the experience of arts and music, then that's when the community can really build, because we have to know that there is only a very small percentage of people in the world who are privileged enough to learn an instrument. Then you have the majority of the rest of the world that actually doesn't have access to instruments, doesn't have access to lessons, doesn't have access to, maybe even a radio, depending on where you are in the world. And that kind of access, if they don't have that access, I think then it's very, very important to find a way to have them connect with what we do. So being as wide as possible, so encompassing as much of life as possible in the experience of arts and music is the way to build a community, so that you don't really have exclusions, right? So you're not excluding certain people who don't have this or who don't have that, but that as much as possible you find common ground.
Yes, that's so good. And I so appreciate you saying that, because classical music can tend to look really elitist anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you are trying to break down those walls and make it as common as possible.
Yes, yeah.
As reachable as possible.
Yeah, you find a common denominator, and then that's when the community can really kind of grow, because then you are not basically, as I shared just now, you're not excluding anybody, and anyone can step in. So the barrier to entry is very low. Of course, you can then offer extremely great quality, but the barrier must be low. So, for example, Chamber Music and Art Singapore had recently concluded 12 engagement sessions for all the residents in Pasir Ris and Punggol. We were booked by the GRC leaders for these engagement sessions that use music and arts for mental wellness. And so we worked alternatingly with children and adults every Friday night, and it's a virtual program. what is amazing is that as we scaffolded the activities and the experiences for the children, by the fourth or the fifth experience, they were listening to solo Bach cello suites. And
without distraction?
Wow. Okay, I'll get there. And for the whole hour, right? And then the following session, we were listening to Schubert Cello Quintet and Brahms Clarinet Quintet. And these are children who have you can say they have absolutely no access to classical music. But the fact that we can get them to be quiet, and they were painting, right? Or they were doing a very specific piece of artwork that we were guiding them on. But then to have them respond to the music using their art process. And they have no idea they're listening to Bach. They have no idea they're listening to Schubert or Brahms.
Gotcha.
But to just even in less than 6 sessions to get there. And you have these children like set up in front of the TV, their parents have like set up the projector and they're all like sharing a table in the living room, and the parents are doing their dishes and the kids are like doing their artwork, and then they have a Bach on. Yeah, and they don't know what they're listening to, but I think that's what it is. It's like you've got to be smart, you've got to be kind of quick-witted as to how you're going to work in these influences for the children and for the audiences or the people who are coming to experience music and art in a way that like they don't feel that there is burden about it.
Great. What great work. I hope that what you guys have started will just continue to grow. That's fantastic right there in the art and doing in their own homes.
Yes.
That's like different disciplines of art coming together.
Right. And then, in order to capture the children's attention, we've got these really wonderfully animated storybooks that we've built. And then we're telling the story, and then we're like introducing the art experience we're going to be doing today. And then you've got all this music embedded into all the different animals that you see in these. And then you end up like actually having them soaking this music without knowing. And I think a lot of times, when I was young, my parents would house 3 of us into the car at 6:30 in the morning because we all went to different schools, and they would shuttle us to 3 different schools. And the moment we get in, it's 92.4 symphony. And it's all this sort of unknowingly, soaking it in that really kind of becomes your blood. And so even now, I never do requests when I get into friends' vehicle or something, let's listen to Symphony 92.4. But when they put that on, I immediately feel calmer. Like I immediately have slower breathing, and like I'm just happier. And it's just unconscious, it's subconscious, and I always feel so grateful when I get in a car and that's 92.4, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. And of course, if that's pop music, I don't say anything, but it's so this kind of like unseen and like just unknowingly having that atmosphere at home really makes a difference.
Right on. Lovely. Can I go on to another question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Why is playing in an ensemble or a chamber group so important to you?
I think you learn a lot from working with other people.
Yes.
You learn a lot from them, but you also learn a lot about yourself. And I think it's the quickest way to grow as a person. So you learn to communicate, but you learn to communicate your ideas, but you also learn to listen to other people's ideas. And then you also learn to communicate without using words and to listen without using words.
Absolutely.
So it's sort of that you're learning how to verbally communicate and to listen to others verbally communicate to you, but also non-verbal. And that back and forth, I think, really builds you as a human. So the ability to observe, to respond, whether it is verbal or non-verbal, and then to actually come up with a product together, or like an interpretation or like a presentation together. And I think that kind of teamwork, you can't can't not experience, I think. As a musician, I think you just cannot escape it. Even the greatest pianists who play mostly solo, they still play with other people. Let's say with an orchestra, you're still playing with someone else, or you're working with a conductor. So I don't think that you can actually, only be alone all the time. Yes, okay, piano recital maybe, but even then you've got the different voices working with each other. But that's maybe really pushing it to the extreme. But every pianist, I'm sure, has the opportunity to work with others, and so I don't think that I don't think you can really exclude that kind of music making from the life of a musician, whether you're amateur or professional.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it's very important. And what I had described before is sort of the what makes it necessary, or what makes it so meaningful, and how much ensemble playing can actually build us as people.
Yes.
So I mean, very recently I saw, I have a friend, and he's a wonderful volleyball player, and his children are also getting into team sports, and he was asked, why don't you put your kids in badminton or something, and he said, no, I would like my kids to do team sports. And I think that there is definitely that difference when you are working together, working towards a goal, and you've got to be like encouraging towards your peers, but at the same time be demanding enough, or like expecting enough, so that everybody does the best they can as a group. So there is all that in play, and I think that it's just such a great cooker or environment to be able to just like become a more competent human being.
I just completely and wholeheartedly agreed with every point that you said, because I feel like even for children growing up and being involved in ensemble playing, this prepares them. I mean, everything that you said, the listening, the communication, nonverbal and verbal, you will have to work in teams next time in school, all levels of school, whether you like it or not, and in the workplace next time.
Yes, exactly.
We're not built to be silos. We're not built to be islands to ourselves.
Right. We can't. Yeah. There is always that part that you are kind of like, on your plate, or that you are taking care of, but then you are only one part of a bigger picture. So I think that chamber music can teach us a lot about that. So it's not just about playing chamber music. It is about just living an effective or positive life, as a human.
Yeah. And I love it that since we started our chat together, you have provided many examples of what building community is like. It's not just in the living room as your parent is doing something and you're doing art. It's not just playing together. It's not just performing together. I think that you've just, touched on many different examples of ensemble play and why it's important, and it's important to life.
Yes, it is. I mean, another example I can give, I think it's always stuck with me. I think I was about 16 when I went to Japan. I don't know if it was for the first time, but it was for the first Japanese festival I was at. And none of my chamber music mates there spoke English. Everybody spoke Japanese, and I didn't speak a word of Japanese. So can you imagine? I mean, we had to go on stage, we had to perform, right? I think we were doing like Brahms piano quintet or something. It was something huge. And we were rehearsing with no possibility of communicating verbally.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was like Japanese and then English, and like we could not communicate, but we did our very best. We were like pointing, we were like gesturing, we were like demonstrating.
There you go.
Yeah, and you're smiling, you are emitting good vibes, and you're playing in a way that supports other people, and you get through it, and then you finally I remember at the end of that festival, like I was almost in tears, because it was just such a meaningful I didn't think it was possible, and because you feel that support even though you don't speak the same language, I think it's even more touching and more memorable, or like you just feel that sense of humanity, I guess, and connection. So yeah, that's another one that really left an impression on me.
Thank you for sharing that memory. It's a beautiful example of how music can cross language barriers and cultural barriers as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what a great memory right there. As a pianist, how can one get started with playing in an ensemble?
Well, I guess I'll be hearing the couple of students from D-flat Studios soon, and I think you can always, of course, start with four hands. I think that's already challenging enough. Like you're sharing a keyboard, you're so close to each other. You're tuning in, and like you're having to already work together in a very small space. And try to get a product out to your audiences or present something that you can both be very proud of. So yeah, you can start with four hands. You can start with playing with one other person on another instrument, like a string player or a singer. You can, and then after that, of course, you can get into like a little bigger ensemble. So piano with like 2-string instruments or 4-string instruments. That gets more and more complicated, of course. And it's a tough one to navigate when we're young. Because when you put like, let's say 4-string players and one pianist together, then you've got to have the 4-string players kind of then have that ability to work with one another, but then have the ability to work with an instrument that's very different from the string instrument, and have that come together, because the piano is so different from the string instruments.
Oh yes.
And pianists, I think you better start with 1 or 2 string instruments, because then you also need to know how string players approach their instrument and
absolutely
what they need in order to produce the phrasing, the sounds that they need.
Yes.
And the timings that they need. It's very different from a pianist, right? Like it's more of a percussion instrument. So then you need to get that familiarity with one person, with 2 persons, and then after that, then with a quartet. Yeah, that's tough, really, really tough. It can help actually with a coach, when they're younger. So 12 and younger, or like even 16 and younger, with a coach is much easier, because then they have someone to be the conductor for them. Conductor in the sense of like conduct the rehearsal, conduct the conversations, right? And conduct the direction, let's say. So we had that. I remember we did like a Schumann piano quartet when I was very young, like for the President's Charity Concert. This was way back, like I think I was in 10 or something, 10 or 11. And we had a very experienced musician coach us. And all 5 of us were very young. We were all like under 16. And I think we managed a really, really good performance. And I think it's because you've got that guide that can kind of put you together and embrace all of you. And then you take that example and you also are able to embrace your colleagues. Yeah, because I mean, when you're young, you don't really know what you're doing sometimes.
Absolutely right. And somebody who's there that can oversee and see the big picture and then communicate and tie all the loose ends together. Absolutely. Yes, sure. Tell us about your upcoming concert. Concerts.
Yes. Well, like I shared, we had a 2-year hiatus from large projects, and we're finally coming back with one in January. So that's like about a month away. We have got 4 evening concerts and 2 concerts for children planned at Esplanade. So this will be with the Italian pianist Luca Brato. We'll be performing all 10 Beethoven sonatas for piano and violin over 4 evening concerts. So it will be done chronologically, 1 hour per evening concert, so 2 per night. And then our 2 interactive concerts, which are very, very popular, because sold out within like a week. One of them got sold out within a week of opening ticket sales. And so we've opened more shows, but those are happening at Asian Civilizations Museum, and that will be on December 18th. So we've got also 2 pop-up appearances by our Homegrown Series artists at Asian Civilizations Museum. That's on 17th December. So basically, we are in the throes of extreme intense preparations, whether it's logistics or like programming, like little, fine tuning our program rundowns and things like that. So it's basically 17, 18 December at Asian Civilizations Museum. And then 8th and 9th January with our international artists at Esplanade Recital Studio. For more information, you can check chambermusicarts.com.sg. That's our website, and we have got all our information there, including the additional concerts that we're doing at Asian Civilizations Museum, which just got added like a couple of days ago and got finalized. So it's all a bit, I saw like a big push towards it and was so excited. And once mid-January hits, we will have a slight breather, hopefully. But we have a lot of work in the community planned from mid-December.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. We will put out those dates as we share this chat so that people who are interested, could, maybe click on there and then go to them. Can I ask you, you've mentioned slightly earlier in our chat that you created an extensive online something or other on music. Yes, on music history. Tell us more about that, please. Yeah,
it's called the Glass House. We had it was our response to the pandemic. It contains 4 programs, and we call them #Origins and #Blossoms. #Origins has its base in classical chamber music. Actually, all of it has its base in classical chamber music, but just that #Origins really focuses on the stories of these great creative masters. So we have got 24 composers that we're focused on for 2 years, and we've completed already 1 year of stories. They're all hand-drawn, bespoke illustrations and animations, together with iconic stories about these composers. So, we line them up from Bach all the way to Vivaldi, and it's a lot of work, and we've got an illustration team that works with us on this. And we publish every month. For #Blossoms, it is focused much more on using music and arts for personal inner development. So #Blossoms, the first program for children and youth, focuses on arts experiences. So it's usually things that you can do at home, and it's guided by our art therapist, and she's the one that sets the direction for each of the story that gets published. And these stories are, again, illustrated, animated, not hand-drawn by our own illustration team, but yes, we use the assets from a child-friendly creative platform called Fancy. And so we built the stories, and this particular program, #Blossoms, Colorful Blooms in Spring for Children and Youth, is very popular with our communities like children on the autistic spectrum, children and youth with intellectual disabilities. So we work with our really deeply in the communities with this program. This is also the one that was adopted by Pasir Ris and Pongo GRC for their mental wellness series. And the second #Blossoms program for youth and young adults. This one is very special. It's for more mature audiences, and every story provides 3 musical anecdotes that we can then reflect and express on. And every single story has a character strength that we are working on or that we are exploring. So it can be character strengths like kindness, appreciation of beauty, excellence, humility, self-regulation. It's a whole range of 24 different character strengths. So basically, the whole sphere we've planned out for 24 sets of stories, so times 4. Because there are 4 programs, so whatever that is, 96, I think, something like that. So yeah, we've done, we've completed half of those, and it's very exciting, and it's wonderful because then we can use it. We've been asked by various charities to run these engagement sessions for their beneficiaries using the content that we have. So it's really wonderful to be able to bring classical music in an extremely benign manner, like as I was sharing before, you don't even realize that that's what you're listening to, and then together with the, like, for example, the hashtag origin stories, like really go into the composer's iconic themes. For example, Beethoven going there, like, you touch on the theme of resilience, of determination, of courage.
Yes.
And then we touch on themes like friendship, or even themes like death through the Requiem, Fauré's Requiem. So there are these different aspects of life that we're able to explore in a very unknowing and innocent fashion, because everything's so wonderfully illustrated and animated that you don't realize. And the music is then embedded into these stories. So whether it's audio or video, and we've also got these worksheets that come with the stories. So these so-called worksheets, we call them activity sheets or canvas sheets. So the canvas sheets are much more for expression. So for example, there was a nice story about the friendship of Haydn and Mozart. And they've got decades of years in between them, right? So we have the canvas sheet. We ask the kids, can you tell us if you have a friend who's much older than you, like maybe a grandfather, your neighbor or something like that, and tell us about that friendship, right? Or go find a friend who is like an old grandpa or old grandma, right? And then there's so much that you can glean out of that, because they've got so many like stories that are just not from our era. So then that canvas sheet's about that. But then the activity sheets, we have a whole range from like crossword puzzles to word searches, but they're always based on the stories. Even things like design your own society, because I think we had a story on the French society that was promoting French music during Fauré's time. So Fauré was one of the founding members of that society, and they had premiered many of the contemporary French composers at the time. So then we asked them, design your own society, or like set your own scene for Midsummer Night's Dream, something like that, because that was for Mendelssohn. So, and the software we use, that platform that we use, has all of these animated assets that you can add into your sheet. And it's so easy to just do up and then after that pin it onto our boards. So that's where I think the kids can really process what they read and express it as well. So that activity sheet is to process it, is to have it more sort of integrated into our understanding. And then after that, the canvas sheet is really to express itself. So that's fun. We had one for Bartok as well, night music, because he's got his night music style, and then we have the kids like do up a Bartok inspired night music scene. Yeah, so we've got like the stars, the night sky, and the mountains, and whatever you want, right? Like yeah, your lonely like flute player in the countryside, because that's his night music style. It's like all this like night animals like crickets and lonely owls and things like that. So yeah. And it just stretches the imagination of the children. So when they listen to music, they again get transported into, let's say, a different culture, a different time in history, a different geography, like a different place in a different time. So when you do really understand and experience the whole of the Glass House of all the 4 programs, the ultimate purpose is really to find where you are in the timeline of humanity.
Wow.
But we don't say that out loud, and we don't like we don't market that out loud. But that's the quiet intent behind it. Because if you really do go through all the stories, you start to then piece everything together. That there's all these connections. So we're doing Ravel stories now, and it's connected with Fauré because he studied with Fauré, and so there's all these different connections. Like Bartok, when he came over to New York during World War II, what slightly before World War II, to escape the war, and then during that time, Bernstein had risen to fame because he like was pushed on stage to conduct New York. So it's just all that crisscrossing, and then the final product is realizing that these great creative masters are not that different from us. Yeah, they have got great talent in that arena, but that as a human, they have the same emotional range and experiences, similar experiences fundamentally similar, and that even though they were like maybe 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 200 years ago, there is that sense of connectivity that you can feel with them. And then when you do have that, I think then you can start to figure out where you are in the timeline of humanity. And I'm a parent of a child who's in the glass house, who is so fascinated with all the stories, and he spends hours just, researching beyond the stories that we present.
Wow.
Because it enhances his life, and he realizes how much even adults can benefit from this if you do read deeper into it. So how like some movies are made for adults, like they're made for kids, but actually for adults. Yeah, so like those animated films and things like that. Yeah, so I think it's a bit like this. Like if you are quite a curious adult, you can glean so much more out of it than your child.
Right.
So that's what we've been busy with. Yeah, and it's wonderful. I mean, we've just got like support from the French embassy, so that we're presenting a set of 6 stories based on 3 French composers for their Voila Festival. And then we also got a commission to for an illustrated story that highlights key moments in Singapore's history. This was from Chamber Orchestra in Singapore, and they had commissioned the music behind it, and then it got translated into an interactive story by our team. So various things that come out of this, like we had 2 VR 360 experiences also built based on themes from the glass house, and that was supported by the National Arts Council, and we had then partnered with the Norwegian Cultural Center to get that out, because one of the VR 360 experience is actually imposing Greek's music on the Norwegian landscape in a 360 environment, right? So that was quite an adventure to work on. And we had like then built in all the folk, I mean, as much folk elements as we knew about Norwegian fairy tales. So they've got all these little trolls and everything that we hid in the mountains. And yeah, so it's been really, really fun. Wow. Unimaginable amount of work.
It sounds like you went to the nth degree so that these kids can benefit, and I mean, you've spoken avidly as a music educator, not just a performer, and just how to build community. I mean, that's a lot of information right there.
Yeah, I hope, through our chat, those who are listening can take away, some good ideas or apply some of the sharings or check out our offerings. I think CMAS team, Chamber Music Art Singapore, we are very, very passionate about what we do.
It comes through in the most wonderful way.
Thank you.
And last but not least, where will we see Tang Tee Khoon in 5 years?
Wow. You did send me this question in advance, and I did KIV that question and told myself I'll come back to that. But I don't think I actually came up with an answer. Let me think. 5 years from now, I had KIV this, and I was like, I'm going to come back to it, and I don't have an answer.
You sound like you live a really full life.
Yeah, I think the reason why I don't have an answer is because I live today as well as I can.
Absolutely.
And I think the future takes care of itself when you live purposefully right now and today, and absolutely do your very best in front of yourself, even when you're alone, because a lot of the work that I do is actually alone, in the sense of like I'm physically alone, right? Like even when I'm doing creative writing, researching, leading the team, or like guiding the illustrators, but that's a lot of alone. But then when I do what I what I'm doing today well, and to the expectation that I set for myself. Like, I don't even have time to think about what tomorrow is going to come. I mean, apart from like, yes, you know, my schedule, like your appointment book.
Yes.
Yeah, and then trying to, you know, prep for what you've been booked for or like committed to. But other than that, like, you know, there's not much time to like think about that. So yeah, but I do hope to have a bigger picture. At the moment, it is, you know, I think the pandemic also gives it a little much more like intense daily kind of ensuring that you're on top of everything on that day.
Sure.
Because everything changes every day. Like,
True.
you know, the
True.
new variant here, and like, you know, the restrictions are now this way, and is another thing, you know. So yeah, I think the pandemic just makes us like have to like really, you know, hunker down and
Yes.
do the best you can today, and you really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
You said
So
it.
oh yeah, I mean, an example would be like we had a chain of small fundraising dinners planned, and this was when we had the restriction for 5 people to
Yes,
be
sure.
invited to a home, right? And then October hit. Remember, there was this sharp increase, and then all of those had to be completely postponed, and now they're all happening in December. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like every week there is a fundraising dinner whilst we're like trying to work for Beethoven, the big Beethoven project coming up. So it's a bit yeah, you just don't know. And then you're like, we're on, it's 5 people again, we can gather. I'm like, okay. And you just handle
Your
it.
schedule, yeah, your schedule must be so packed.
Wow. Yeah, but it's okay. I mean, yeah, it's probably also high expectations for what I do, like for myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Tee Khoon, this was an insightful chat with you, and thank you for sharing your passion. We've been talking about building a musical community, which is one of D-Flat Studios' core values. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We've just heard from violinist, internationally known violinist Tang Tee Khoon, and she is proudly Singaporean.
Yeah.
And this is so we're now come to the close of our 3rd installment of our masterclass series. You have a good afternoon. You have a good afternoon, and Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Bye, everyone.